Hello, my friends. So today I just want to give you some very brief general ideas on the topic of eugenics. I think I'll go into more detail in future videos, but I just want to really give you an overview of the general problem that I'm looking at. Because it's really one of the most amazing shifts in history. And I think that the shift of opinion on eugenics represents one of the greatest power shifts of all time. And this shift occurred before and after World War II. Before World War II, public opinion on eugenics, from the general public all the way up to leaders of politics, leaders of industry, leaders of academic fields, including anthropology, including the burgeoning genetics research and genetic studies, the consensus in both America and Europe, not just Nazi Germany, but America, France, England, Germany, of course, but America especially. The consensus among the public and the academics and politicians, was to some extent pro-eugenics. Now, it wasn't all politicians, obviously. It wasn't all academics, obviously, but there was a general sense of a consensus. And there was certainly a general acceptability of these ideas. And by eugenics, I mean specifically racial eugenics. In America, in particular, there were anti-miscegenation laws in a number of states. There were compulsory, I'm pretty sure, compulsory sterilization laws in a few states, but especially the anti-miscegenation laws. This was an explicitly racial eugenics policy that was widely considered to be just a common sense thing, very common sense issue. And before World War II, this was perfectly acceptable. And the other thing that you have to know that really makes this a conundrum, I think, is that before World War II, you have these eugenics conferences, like there were 3 international conferences of eugenics, and you have these eugenics research facilities, you have these eugenics publications, you have eugenics textbooks in major universities, and across the board, these powerful and influential eugenicists were convinced 100% that eugenics policies had to be implemented. They were convinced that eugenics policies had to be implemented or society was literally doomed. I think it was Leonard Darwin, a son of Charles Darwin, who in one of these international eugenics conferences, which, by the way, was attended by people like Winston Churchill, attended by delegates sent by Theodore Roosevelt. It was attended by many leaders in many fields. They were convinced that without implementing strong policies for eugenics, then dysgenic processes would destroy civilization. So how is it possible that within the span of the decade, within the 1940s alone, the opinion suddenly reversed, and by 1950 you get the UN publishing their paper, The Race Question, which states that humans are all of one species, that there are no fundamental differences between the races, and you get a sudden reversal of opinion on eugenics as a whole. not just racial eugenics, but eugenics as a whole. And in the world we live in today, there are plenty of dysgenic policies at work. And the common explanation for this is that World War II and the Holocaust made everybody think that any kind of eugenics policies were just morally wrong, that the horrors, the atrocities of the Holocaust was what reversed opinion on eugenics, and especially racial eugenics. But that seems hard to buy, especially if you understand that prior to World War II, these people believed that the maintenance of society as we know it required eugenics policies. It stretches my imagination to think that, they just felt bad. They just felt sorry for, like, the Jews in Germany, and therefore they threw up their hands and said, oh, well, I guess we'll just let society be doomed. It's hard to believe. So what really happened? There are a couple of possible explanations I'd like to explore. The first is that there was a power shift in the elites, and that prior to World War II, there was still a significant faction of elites that strongly identified with and felt a loyalty to their ethnic group, their racial group. And they wanted their racial group to become as good as they possibly could be because they identified with them. They strongly identified with them and felt a loyalty to them. But then after World War II, the faction that won out and became the dominant faction of elites was an internationalist faction that did not feel any racial loyalty, or their racial loyalty was different. They didn't have a racial loyalty to Europeans. They had a racial loyalty to maybe a different chosen tribe from the desert. So that's one possible explanation. Another possible explanation is that this conflict was sort of managed from the start, and that eugenics was originally presented to the population as a whole in order to get that idea into their heads, so that once World War II happened, then suddenly they could do sort of a bait and switch and make people feel really bad for their prior sense of racial identity and their prior sense of racial superiority, and that it was all managed from the start. I think it could be a mixture of those two explanations, but we'll explore that in future videos. But I think what is happening now, what I can say is happening now, is that the elite class has no loyalty to any racial group other than themselves. And the reason that we have dysgenic policies for the masses today is that they want to create a pronounced separation between the elites and the non-elites, the average people. They want to make that separation as distinct as possible, because the more clearly distinct the inequality is between the elite ruling class and the ruled masses, the easier it is for those ruled masses to just sort of throw up their hands and accept the elite overlords, because the difference between them, the divergence that has occurred, is so pronounced and so obvious that no conflict is really possible between them. It's like the difference between a child and their parent. There's no possible meaningful conflict because the power differential is so clear and so obvious that there's no capacity for a conflict between the two of them. You have to sort of just accept that you're being ruled over. And if dysgenics is promoted for the general populace, but eugenics is still promoted secretly for the elites, then that difference will continue to get more and more pronounced until one day the elites can sort of take off the mask of democracy, reveal themselves as the rulers, and the population as a whole will feel no real sense of injustice. They'll feel no sense of, no impetus to fight against it because they've been brought down so low and the elites raised up so high that a meaningful conflict between these two groups is impossible. So those are my thoughts for now. I will continue to revisit this issue in the future. Thank you for watching.